Thanks for listening to the Media People Podcast, lively and insightful chats with the people who power the media industry. I'm your host, Victor Genova. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Views expressed by participants are personal. In May of 2022, Becca Lucas Lord resigned from her role as VP, Director of Client Services at Wunderman Thompson. She was ready to explore new opportunities that complemented her recent agency work. Well, that sabbatical lasted all of 3 days before she was asked to return in a consulting role. When you look at the breadth of Becca's resume, it's easy to see why they wanted her back. Besides Wunderman Thompson, Becca's career includes time at Cohn Wolfe, Sequentia Environics, Twist Image, and Mirum. She has worked on all categories from automotive, CPG, pharmaceuticals, and even petroleum pipelines. Becca Lucas Lord stops by to chat about growing up in London, Ontario, why she took a year off from university, her career journey from coordinator to VP, and the decision to move into consulting.
So I guess you could say I'm a bit of a free agent these days. I have been working most recently as a consultant, and an opportunity actually with the agency that I've been with for some time came up, and it really kind of introduced me to the beauty of consulting. Over the last, I guess, almost year now, I've been working with Wunderman Thompson. So I previously held the position of Vice President, Director of Client Service, and sort of / business lead. So I can talk about that in a second. But an opportunity came up following my resignation from Wunderman Thompson to stay on with them, which was really exciting. And it kind of came about by virtue of a new client that we had just started to work with. They were interested in having me kind of come back, if you will, and stay on as a consultant to sort of build a team. And it was really an opportunity that I honestly could not pass up. Loving the team from WT as I do, and this new client was really juicy. It was exciting. It was also an opportunity to build kind of what I'm calling a mini WPP team. So it was a group of us from Wunderman Thompson, Mindshare, and Hill and Knowlton all coming together to service this client. So got a chance to try my hand at consulting, which has been really interesting and to be honest, kind of opened the door for me to think about how I might want to do more of this in this industry and kind of beyond. But taking it back for the last several years, prior to my consulting time, I was vice president at Wunderman Thompson, and I was previously at Wunderman, and as I like to say, I kind of came in through the Wunderman door. As many listening will know, WPP brought together Mirum, Wunderman, and J. Walter Thompson in a global merger. And so coming together with that organization, having spent some time on the Wunderman side prior to that, I held the position of vice president. And so there were a couple of other folks like myself at senior levels who were responsible for running almost like an agency within an agency. So I oversaw a business unit. It was a book of business, significant chunk of revenue, and was really looking after, along with a couple of colleagues, people, product, and profit. So it was not just about the discipline of director of client service, although I did definitely play a role in supporting that for the agency. It was really almost like being kind of a managing director of your own agency within the agency.
Becca, thank you so much for dropping by today. You and I have been trying to do this for a while, so I'm glad we were able to get this chat on the books. Let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from?
London, Ontario.
And what was life like growing up in London?
London is kind of it's a pretty decent sized city that feels sometimes like a small town. So, definitely had kind of a very maybe traditional suburban upbringing. But I think London's a good city to grow up in. They call it the Forest City, and it certainly lives up to that name. It's a college and university town. But honestly, that was pretty lost on me growing up, other than the fact that, I did some sports and kind of, visited the university campus. My parents had gone to Western. And so, yeah, but growing up in London, I have to say was pretty good.
Did it feel like a university town though? Because we already talked about the size of it. We said that it's one of the bigger cities in Canada, but it's something like as of today, isn't it something like more than 700,000 people there? It's definitely north of 600, that's for sure. If you look at some of the smaller cities in the United States, like Columbus, that have NHL teams, just based on population numbers, like London, Ontario should have an NHL team.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. I don't know exactly whether it's the 10th largest or ninth or 11th, but it kind of hovers around that spot. And like you said, it's on par with some pretty decent sized cities that we think of in the States. And the thing that's unique about London too is there's nothing around it. Like,
Yes, that's a good point.
it's surrounded by farmland. And to be honest, like that's one of the things, having moved back here from Toronto recently. Um, I don't think I appreciated when I was growing up here, but I really appreciate it now. I mean, you can, within 45 minutes, you can be in, lakeside at Lake Erie or Lake Huron. There's all these beautiful little cottage towns that are, half an hour away. You're
Are you
surrounded
referring to
by,
like Grand Bend, for example?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like to stay a little north of Grand Bend these days because I'm not 17 and drinking Bud Light. But I think
Is that what
I
people do in Grand Bend? I,
it's like one of those like Wasaga kind of, it no in all fairness, I think there's a lot of like really nice beautiful developments that have kind of sprung up, but I always think of like Grand Bend's where you go to party in high school. It's like it's got the drag and it's got like the bars and yeah, but there's beautiful little like towns like Bayfield and Goderich and Kincardine and Port Elgin, all the way up the coast of Lake Huron. And we went to cottages there growing up, and yeah, have kind of a special affection for Lake Huron. My wife and I got engaged at my family's cottage, overlooking the sunset, and so have a little bit of a romance with Lake Huron. So it's part of what I roll into London. But yeah, London's a really pretty big city that people tend to think of as a small town.
are you closer to the U.S. border through Chatham or through Windsor?
Yeah, definitely kind of the Sarnia way. So
That's right.
over to
Sorry,
Port,
Sarnia. Yeah, Chatham,
yeah,
Kent, and
Port,
then to Sarnia.
yeah, Port Huron. I think like I could be across the border to Port Huron in 45, 50 minutes. And then Windsor's a couple hours drive. There's actually an awesome artist, and he's a graphic designer. He's kind of a Renaissance man. Named James Kingsley here, and he designs these really great shirts, among many other things he does. He has a local publication here that kind of keeps tabs on what's interesting and new happening in London. But he designed he has like the shirts, like that sort of famous stacked like Helvetica type, and he's got these ones that say like halfway between Toronto and Detroit. So I
Oh,
just bought
nice.
I just bought a couple for my wife and I. We've been saying that our whole lives. So it's like the thing that helps you situate yourself when you're in London, because there really isn't anything else around you. Everyone from surrounding really small towns always comes to London to eat, to shop, and kind of, taking some concerts, hockey, whatever.
You considered yourself more of an artsy kid growing up, but there was one sport that you did that jumped out at me because I did it too growing up. How did you find yourself into water polo?
Okay. Well, I can't say I stayed long in the pool, but for a year or two, I played water polo when I was about 11 and 12. Um, and the way I think it was actually a friend of the family, their daughter played. And yeah, and I think it was just like often happens when you're 11 or 12 years old, conversation between parents, and yeah, all of a sudden I was on the team. So I played at the University of Western Ontario, which was pretty cool. I remember very, very, very early morning Saturday drives up to Western, walking through the underground tunnels, which my parents loved to show me as alumni from Western. Yeah, I knew I was getting close when I started to smell the overwhelming chlorine smell. But yeah, only played for a couple of years when I was around that age.
And when it came to the arts, it seems like you did everything. It was piano, you were in theater. Okay, so it sounds like you
Yeah.
were a music theater kid. Can we say it that way? Is that the best way to sum it up? Like, is Becca looking
Uh,
for a Tony?
um, I think maybe in my earlier days I probably was. Yeah, I was definitely the kid in orchestra, the kid in drama. Was you know um, really wanted to be the lead and was the lead often in a lot of plays, kind of growing up. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think that's fair.
Did you do Royal Conservatory piano lessons?
No, no, I didn't. No, I did private lessons for maybe probably
But
5 years.
was it going through the Royal Conservatory grades?
No, it wasn't. It
Oh,
wasn't
you
that.
avoided those. Oh, thank
Wasn't that
God.
balls to the wall. I think my grandmother and my mother, who both did the conservatory grades, like I think they were both like wonderful musicians, vocalists, and piano players, and I could never live up to it. Piano just wasn't my thing. I played mostly by ear. I was really good at playing by ear, but like at a certain point that you kind of cap off. Like you can't get any further if you're not really, really solid on reading music. So I kind of hit a wall with it.
Why do you cite your grandparents as your biggest influence?
Oh, that's a good one. They these are my maternal grandparents. We spent so much time with them. Like we really did. We were one of those families that had Sunday dinner every single Sunday. My parents grew up in little tiny towns, about half an hour outside of London. My dad grew up in Mount Bridges and then went to high school in Strathroy. My mom grew up in Strathroy. I don't know. My grandparents were well, first of all, my grandfather was a high school principal and a history teacher before that. He was a cadet. He was in World War II. He was a larger than life character. He was kind of an icon, if you will. There's some pretty epic stories about um, he, he didn't take shit. He was there's a story about some students one year thought it would be a hilarious prank to cover his chairs with his chair in the classroom with thumbtacks facing up, and he pulled out the chair, saw them, sat down, and taught the entire
Oh, damn.
hour and 10-minute history class sitting on probably 60, 70 thumbtacks. He would not give these students the satisfaction of even a grimace. He wore these big, heavy, dark rim glasses, and he got the nickname the Coon because he looked like a raccoon wearing them. Very 70s. And he was an incredible person and human. He wrote poetry and he baked biscuits and he made homemade soups, but then he was also a huge sports fan and just tough as nails military guy. The way he showed his affection is he'd walk by and he would take his knuckle and he'd rap you on the head 2 or 3 times really hard, and that meant I love you. Like he was was not an emotional guy, but a really just an interesting educator, an interesting human being. My grandmother was, like I said, sang in choirs and played the piano. They both loved to um, they both loved to be by the lake. They both loved to travel. They loved things like music and theater. And I really got exposed and had the opportunity to take in some pretty world-class theater in Toronto and in Stratford at the Stratford Festival. Because of them, they really felt like that was important, and they could see that I was really, developing a love for it. So they made sure I had a lot of opportunities. So I just grew up spending a lot of time with them and really loved the sensitivity and also maybe like the structure, the sensitivity and the structure that were represented by both of them.
At Stratford, were you taking in some Shakespeare?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I acted in the seventh grade. I played Hermia in the production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and my grandparents the next year, the Stratford Festival was putting it on, and they took me, and yeah, it really blew my mind. And then I've gone to the festival, I don't know, maybe have missed a year or two here or there, but I've gone to the festival every year since.
Is it going to rebound this year after the pandemic? Because I guess this is the first time that it's in full swing without any sort of restrictions.
Yes, I think it is. I think for a couple of reasons. They have the new Tom Patterson Theater. It is a beautiful space. I haven't gone on a tour yet, but I've swung by and sort of crept around the outside. But also, I think they're doing some really amazing things with uh, programming in terms of making creative choices with traditional shows, but at the same time also bringing some really unexpected shows, like doing Little Shop of Horrors and Rocky Horror Picture Show, and like these shows where everyone's there, wearing feather boas and they've had one too many drinks, and it's just like a riot of a time. I think they're bringing a lot of really interesting programming alongside, you know, the the traditional shows. My parents are going to see King Lear with Paul Gross on Thursday, and that's one of the only Shakespearean plays I have not seen on stage, and it was my grandfather's favorite. So I can't wait to go take it in.
King Lear was a comedy, right? If I remember correctly, because
It's
I throw that out there because in high school I got to, and stop me if you did OAC as well. And to anyone
mhm,
listening, that's grade
yep,
13. But for some reason, it was too pretentious to call it grade 13 when we were in high school. And I
yep.
remember I got to OAC English, and my English teacher, I forget what we were supposed to learn or what Shakespeare play we were supposed to study, but she had said, ever since the ninth grade, you've done nothing but dramas from Shakespeare. So you must think this guy's incredibly depressing. So she made us she was the only teacher that swapped us into a comedy. I'm pretty sure it was King Lear for that reason only. She's like, no more. She's like, no more dramas.
Oh, I'm sure many of them there's an element of comedy. Like you always have that sort of balance. I mean, Shakespeare's really good at that. I think traditionally it's kind of seen more as a tragedy only because this father who's completely sort of embroiled in this he's has these three daughters and affection for the three of them, and he sort of it's all about him kind of preparing for old age and death, and dividing up his property and his wares amongst these three daughters, and the relationship between the three of them. And I think eventually, if I'm not mistaken, I think he goes kind of insane. So it's about sort of this like fall of this great man. Um, so maybe, maybe there's some comedy in that. I don't know.
Well, if it ends better than Romeo and Juliet, then it's definitely a lighter tone.
Most things do. Yeah.
What was your first job ever?
Well, my first job ever was a paper route that I had delivering Sears catalogs in the third grade. A friend and I were on our bikes and we were being chased by some grade six bullies, and we pulled into a driveway pretending it was our house, and somehow wound up like talking to this neighbor who said, "Hey, do you kids want to talk about maybe having a job?" And I always think back to that moment because it's really the difference between my dad and my friend's father. I guess my friend Melissa went home and told her parents, and they said, "Ah, no, you don't need a job." I went home and told my dad, who is very very enterprising and all about kind of developing that sense of responsibility, and he was like, "Perfect, yes, you should definitely have a job." So I remember going and getting my first bank account in the third grade and taking my little red wagon all over and delivering my Sears catalogs. So that was technically my first job. You throw in a little babysitting here and there as well, uh, working my way through the neighborhood. But I think my first real job was working for the London and Middlesex Housing Authority when I think it was probably the summer I was 16 or 17. I worked developing and leading recreation and wellness programming for kids who were all residents of um, rent geared to income housing. So it's now called affordable housing, but at the time it was called rent geared to income housing. So there were seven or eight of these communities throughout London. Were all managed by the Housing Authority, and this was really about giving kids in these communities an opportunity to attend what was essentially camp, like summer day camp, because their families certainly would not have been able to send them to a camp or even get them into a YMCA or sleepaway camp or anything like that.
What kind of impact did that have on you? Because I'm sure you went to school with kids that didn't have the same social status as others. Maybe they were living below the poverty line, but when you're
Yeah.
that young, you kind of don't see it.
Yep.
You notice certain things, but it just kind of goes over your head. But now you were what, like 17 years old? You've got the benefit of
Yeah.
perspective, a little bit more mature than you were. What kind of
Yep.
impact did that have on you? Did you even reflect back on some of your friends or people that you knew at school 10 years prior going, oh my God, I think they would have benefited from this program or probably went
Yeah.
through this program and we just had no clue at the time?
Yeah. I mean, to answer the question, it had a profound effect on me. And I think I see that opportunity, and I see that what I dealt with, what I encountered, what that job taught me. I see that sort of it reverberating throughout my entire career and adult life. It's made me a more passionate advocate and community-minded volunteer. It's why later on in my career, few years into my career, I was tied to the Children's Aid Foundation, and that that was really important to me, and that started a curiosity when it comes to, the foundation is the financial support arm for children's aid societies across the country. But I learned I learned a lot of perspective. I learned to contextualize my own privilege. Um, I learned that not everyone grew up the way I was fortunate enough to grow up. And to be honest, like, you know, you're a team of three young people, and you're embedded within the community. The kids don't come to the high school gym. Like, you're given a townhouse unit within the community, and you are running the program out of um, that unit within the community, day in and day out, and you're there 9 hours a day. And so you're really embedded. You're really embedded. You're really getting to know the families, the parents, the social dynamics. Um, yeah, it had a profound effect on me.
Well, I study English and media information and technoculture at Western University. Like, why decide to study that and stay local at the same time?
So I think I think there's sort of a whole bunch of different things that are kind of connected in. I I switched programs a couple of times. I took a general first year. I was doing a lot of English and social science, and I really didn't know too much about MIT, which was very new at Western at the time. Like, this was 1998. Um, eh, you know, I didn't know too much about MIT, but as soon as I learned a little bit more about it, I thought, yeah, this really connects a lot of things for me. Um, I ended up switching programs between my second and third year. I took a year off in the middle of university. I just wanted to, like, I think I was one of those students who'd been so head down and gunning for my whole high school career, and wanted to do the next thing. All of my girlfriends from high school went away, and all of my guy friends stayed in London and went to Western. So my first year at university was me hanging out with a lot of guys in some pretty unsavory bars. My first year was pretty interesting. I think I think honestly, if I look back, I think I was afraid to go away to school. I think I'd come from, like, kind of a close knit family. My parents went to Western as well. My grandparents went to Western. Like, it was a little bit of a family thing, although that pressure was never put on me. I applied to Queen's and Mac and a couple of other school, Waterloo, and got great scholarships to those schools. But in the end, I think I felt more comfortable staying home. Of course, there were times where I really wished I'd gone away. And I also was really fortunate to meet a group of great girls and move out in my second year. And so I lived most of my time not at home during school, which I think helped. But Western's a phenomenal school. And because I wasn't going away, like one of my friends went away for architecture, one went away for veterinary. Like I was, I wasn't going away for a specific program or a specific school. And so I knew I had a phenomenal educational institution on my doorstep. And so that was part of it as well. But as I learned more about MIT, that's what sort of caused me to shift gears. I ended up doubling up and doing all of the prereqs in my second year and going into the program in the same year. So I almost had my entire second year was like really dominated by the MIT program. And I think I saw it as a connection point to, all of the literature and English and reading and writing that I loved, the social sciences stuff that I also took, but I saw it as a connection to like this media, pop culture, emerging technology and innovation. It was a really interesting offering at a time when I think a lot of programs weren't really focused in that way.
Did you say that you took a little bit of time off in between as well? Was it your third year, you said?
Yeah, I ended up taking what would have been my third year off.
So you
And
just
then,
took it as a gap year. So
yeah,
when you mentioned that, it sounded like you were going through a little bit of burnout at that point, because you said that you were always
yeah.
full speed ahead on everything. So what made you come to that conclusion? Like, were you concerned that you wouldn't go back to university? I'm sure your
Mm,
parents might have been like, okay, you can take a year off, but you're going back, right? Right? Like conversations like that might have come up because someone had thrown research
yeah.
at me that had said that if a student takes a gap year between high school and their first year of university, the likelihood of them going to university or college after that drops by something like 60%.
Yeah, I did have a lot of people um who said to me, "Oh my God, don't take a year. Like you'll never go back." To me, and I think anyone who knew me, like strangely enough, my parents weren't at all worried that I wouldn't go back. Like anyone who knew me and I, me knowing myself, I knew I was going back. But I also knew I couldn't without taking taking a beat. Yeah, I think there were just like it was sort of a perfect storm of like there was some, personal life stuff going on. There was total, school burnout, managing change, managing becoming like living on my own for the first time, which I did for the first time in my second year, the way a lot of people do in their first year. Like I didn't have that experience. So there was a whole bunch of different things that contributed to it. And I kind of hit a wall and I knew that I needed to take the time. But it was great actually. I lived with my roommates who were, well, two of them that year they were in the scholars electives program at Western, really intense, serious students. I was surrounded by, all of my friends were still in school. I continued to live with my roommates and I picked up two jobs and was waitressing and working retail and just sort of like, I just had a year where I breathed a little bit and then immediately went back the next year. And I was so much more interested in school and I was so much more purposeful about the courses that I was taking, the professors that I was following, the things I got involved in. It was almost like I finally, like after that year, I had the experience that I think I thought I was going to have the first go around.
After graduation, you re-enrolled, though, into Humber College's corporate communications and PR programs. So, what brought you to
Yeah.
that program and that discipline of communications?
I knew at the time one of my roommates' friends had gone through the program, so I had the opportunity to kind of bend her ear and learn a little bit more about it. It was a natural connection, coming out of an English and media degree. Like essentially, what I kind of I did think a lot about journalism and uh, I think in the end, I did a little bit more research about this program, understood how highly regarded it was, had the opportunity to talk to this friend of a friend who had, really great things to say about the mixture of theory and practical that you got your hands on. And it seemed really interesting to me. So yeah, I think it was, It wasn't more complicated than that.
You mentioned you toyed with the idea of going into journalism. I want to know what persuaded you otherwise. Did you look at it and go, being righteous doesn't pay very well? And I'm not knocking no, I'm not knocking journalists at all. But
Yeah.
the journalists that I see that really seem to be making money, those are the ones that stumble upon or discover a really big story and then parlay that into a book deal. And then they kind of
Mm,
become a TED Talk level celebrity after that, where people want to pay for them to come back and speak.
yep.
Whereas it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of opportunity. And as we record this just a couple days ago, BuzzFeed let go of their entire news department.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I
it's a
saw that.
like, did that have an impact? Like just looking at the economics of it?
I don't know that it was like I wish I could say that I was that practical. As a 20-year-old or 21-year-old. I don't know that I was. I think it was more about really trying to find where I fit. I had gone to, I was one of those, I guess it would have been late 80s, early 90s kind of preteens that had gone to the program at the local high school here in London, where they were really encouraging young girls and young women to be more career minded. So I had done interviews with the anchor of CFPL here in London, the local news station, and I had gotten a chance to, dig into, speaking to a magazine editor. And I think I had in my head as a young person that this idea of being in media and being a journalist. And I think that I MIT and just sort of other factors exposed me to like a different way to be in the bigger world of media, if you will. Which is sort of what led me more into thinking about like communication strategy and corporate communications and public relations.
So what was your first job in media?
Um, my very first job was I was thankfully I was sort of ushered into it by virtue of the internship program that was compulsory for the post grad that I took. So I worked in an agency. So really kind of cut my teeth in a really small agency called Holmes Creative Communications. A colleague of mine from the Humber program had already cultivated a relationship with them. They were very creative focused. They were in entertainment PR. And this colleague of mine, her name's Amy Dory. She's gone on to now she runs her own company called ADPR. She's an amazing professional in communications, but she was one of those people in the program who was super passionate and had done her homework, and she knew HCC really well and was already volunteering and working with them. So she kind of opened my eyes to the potential of this organization. So I ended up doing my internship there and working with them, staying on for a little bit. And got exposure to some pretty amazing clients. Like day one, we were working on the Songwriters Hall of Fame Gala and Canada's Walk of Fame and CTV and Soul Pepper Theatre Company and the Canadian National Exhibition, and like some pretty exciting client opportunities for starting out in a PR agency.
So it sounds like this agency, because it was smaller, you were far more hands-on at the entry level versus, say, bigger
Oh
companies will
yeah.
bring interns in and they'll persuade you not to touch. They won't let you touch anything because you're just there
Yeah,
to get
no.
coffee.
No, we got shown where the buttons were, the control
That's
room.
good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good
No,
because that's like something that students I find have a real conundrum with, and it
yeah.
really deflates them. And the problem with college and university is we're going to teach you to be leaders of tomorrow. Great, I've graduated, I've got student debt, or I had to empty my bank account to get through the program, and then
Yep,
now I'm getting coffee for people. And then
totally.
they realize, wait, it's going to take me a couple years to get to a level where I'm going to be able to have input in the room. So
Yeah.
it just sucks the life and out of it and the ambition.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think this was the opposite of that, to be honest. I think David and Catherine, who owned the agency, they did something really smart. They got, uh, very ambitious, goal-oriented, bright students in the door, and they made them a part of the team. And we felt like a part of the team, and we were given real responsibility. Like I wrote the press kit for the CNE, with
That's a pretty
guidance,
big
of
deal. You
course.
said that you were just in your early 20s there, like fresh out of school. That's a really
Yeah.
big deal. The Canadian National Exhibition is a big deal to anyone who's
Yeah.
not Canadian and listening to this right now.
And it's a big media machine too, like like every news station at the time, we were dealing a little bit more with traditional media, but digital media too. But every news station comes and does their morning wake ups and their evening live eyes from the CNE. It's
Yeah, that's
all of
true.
all of the area, not just Toronto, but the GTA and beyond is really for those 2 weeks. That's what everyone wants to know about what's going on, what's happening today. And so we were like, and it's around, I mean, worked on lots of clients there. Like I worked on and got to see and do an incredible amount. But for those couple of weeks, like, you're there 18, 19 hours a day. Like you're meeting, you're ushering, the breakfast television crew around in the morning, and then you're there for the live eyes till, the last crew leaves at, close to 1 a.m. And yeah, it's I really, really got a lot of mileage out of that first job.
Years ago, I saw one segment from the CNE, and I think it might have been breakfast television. It was one of the early morning shows. And they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about the different food at the food building. Because, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, as you know, and people who don't know what the CNE is, there's an entire food building there, and it has got some of the most eclectic mixes of culinary items that you've ever seen anywhere. Like right
Oh
down
yeah.
to they'll deep fry anything and serve it to you. And it was funny because you could tell certain people wanted the press for their booth or their restaurant, so they dragged themselves up for this at 6:30 in the morning. And you've got the host eating stuff that I mean, you'd only eat at
Oh
6:30 in the morning if you were just coming out of the bar and you were
yeah.
hungover. And it's like, let's try this
Exactly.
deep fried piece of cheese or this thing right here. And it's like that is not breakfast food. But
No.
like those kind of segments.
Yeah. And eating it like, grease and brisket and cheese like dripping down their chin at 7.
Turkey
Yeah, like
legs.
it's stuff. Yeah, the stuff that would give you heartburn like any time of day, but it's not what you want to wake up to. Yeah.
So, what brought you to the Children's Aid Foundation, and take us through what your role there was like as the special events and volunteer coordinator?
Part of the postgrad that I took involved taking a course in the not-for-profit sector and in fundraising. And during that course, we also had an opportunity to do kind of an internship in miniature, and that involved going 1 day a week in and being paired up with an organization that you could go in and volunteer at and support, 1 day a week. So I was really interested in this course. I think I always have had a little bit more of a public affairs, government affairs kind of bent to me. So I was really interested in this course and developed a really good relationship with my professor. And he had a relationship with the foundation. And so he connected me in. And I ended up going, doing my internship, if you will, there. And so when I was coming out of Holmes and looking for, a more kind of permanent role, they had a position open, and it was within their events, marketing, and comms team. And yeah, so I, had already built a great relationship and had worked pretty hard for them. So yeah, was able to come in and start at CAF. I think I did so many different things. Again, this was a pretty hardworking, small team. And I would say primarily my responsibilities were communications and events. So, with the communication side, it would be like newsletters and writing website copy and writing sponsorship proposals, writing reports for donors, um, and prospecting for potential donations. And then on the event side, it was everything, soup to nuts. Like we were working on envisioning what those events would be. And I'm talking about like top tier fundraisers for corporate Canada. So they had to be of a certain level. So whether it was a, fancy schmancy golf tournament or a black tie gala, the Children's Aid Foundation is pretty famous for their teddy bear affair. Sort of where all the who's who would be every November in Toronto. It was a huge fundraiser that would raise millions of dollars that would help fund programming for the foundation and children's aid societies. So my role was like, you know, working on envisioning that, planning it, the full execution, the wrap up. And then, you know, within my little role, my side hustle was managing all of the volunteers for the foundation. So all of the communication with them, the, you know, the building of a volunteer base and nurturing of the volunteer base. And then for events as well, like specifically, I would be the person who would bring together the volunteer team. Sometimes that would be 300-400 people. You know, if you're talking about a gala that runs for 19 hours almost, by the time you've set it all up and torn it all down. And so I would have to, you know, prospect and find that team and secure them and train them and lead them on the day. So a lot of really good experience that I carried forward with me into board positions, but also just into further work.
Do you find that your time at the City of London's Housing Commission prepared you for some of the things you saw?
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely did. And I think what it also helped me do, I mean, working at the foundation, if you don't keep in mind who you are raising money for, you could very easily become removed from that. Because you're not in the CAS, like Children's Aid Society offices, right? So working at the foundation, you're kind of a couple steps removed. But because I had had that early experience where I had, you know, had to pick up the phone and phone Children's Aid to report, you know, violence in the community that I was witnessing, it, you know, it never really left my mind. And one of my favorite events that I got to, you know, help lead planning for was every December we did what they called then the holiday season celebration. And that was a holiday party for kids in care. And, you know, you'd have 1,000 kids like taking over the basement of the Metro Toronto Convention Center, or the basement, the bottom floor ballroom at the Royal York. We'd have all these wonderful donors who would give us space to do these events. And like, then you would be so connected to it. But I remember my executive director at the time at the foundation, wonderful leader named Sheila Johnson. I remember her bringing kids in care into the board meetings, and her really, her wanting to make sure that, you know, these executives who sat on the board, who were all amazing, wonderful professionals giving of their time, but also had the opportunity to hear kids in care speak about their lives.
What brought you to Cohn Wolfe, and what did your role as an account executive for corporate and public affairs entail?
So I actually found out that Cohn Wolfe was looking for an account executive through a woman who'd gone to Cohn Wolfe, and she had been an intern for me at the foundation. So really, you know, nice moment of kind of working your network. Lynn had told me about an open role within the public affairs and corporate team, and so that was initially how I found out about it. I always think about my time at Cohn Wolfe in two parts. I think I was there just over 3 years, but the first year and a half, I came into this really busy team working on Nissan and Infiniti. It was a team that kind of ran like a, well, pretty well-oiled machine, had, you know, great people on the team. It was a long-standing client of Cohn Wolfe. And so that was very corporate, right? So it was messaging strategy. It was some crisis comms. It was a lot of media relations, and a lot of vehicle launches. I'd never worked in automotive before. And so you get pretty intimately familiar with the spec sheets and the just the details of the vehicles. We worked on a lot of launches for new cars. I managed the press fleet, so there was, I don't know, 150 cars that sat in lots in 8 cities across Canada, and I knew where every single one of them was and with what journalist at every single moment of the day and week. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting role. I also got seconded, so I worked Tuesdays and Wednesdays out of Nissan's office, and kind of going inside like that is something that I think started there for me, but I have done several times in my career, and that's kind of a thread running through. So really got to see the inner workings of the organization, work more closely with the client, communications and public relations and internal communications leads, work more closely with the marketing team and contextualize communications and PR as, a function within the larger kind of marketing machine on the client side. So it was a really valuable experience.
Was that the head office near the airport?
Yep, that's it. I always look at where I sat. I can see my window every time I drive by.
Okay, so I'm a car guy.
Yeah.
Which Nissan did you enjoy driving the most? Because I'm sure you had your right
Ooh.
foot on the throttle of all of those models when you were working there.
Oh yeah, I mean that was such a huge perk, right? We got to rent them out and drive them, and also on the we did a lot of traveling with a lot of like Canadian and American media to launch the cars. Oh, so the GTR came back while I was working on it.
Very good choice.
So got to launch the GTR, and it was amazing too because you'd get to go to like Canadian Car of the Year, where get to drive all the vehicles, and some of these journalists who have been through driver training in France and stuff, like on an airport strip, letting it rip in a GTR is pretty fun. I would also say this model isn't around. It was an Infiniti model. They used to have an EX and an FX, and they
I'm
were
familiar with both. Yep.
Yeah, right. And I love those. I love the drive on them. I mean, Infinitis are, they've always been lovely cars, but I loved the drive on both of those vehicles, and they were super fun to drive. We did a couple, when we launched the FX in the US, we did a trip to San Diego, and our drive route was all around like La Jolla and all these beautiful, like kind of oceanside highways. And so that was really, really fun.
You also worked on the Trans-Canada pipelines when you were there. Take us
Oh
through
yeah.
that, client, because pipelines, they are controversial.
Oh yeah. And I mean, that was one of the most contentious situations I think I've ever worked on. And in fact, that was really my last client in traditional PR, in a traditional PR and public affairs like agency setting. So that was the second half of my time at Cohn Wolfe. I was really fortunate to have been brought in by a couple of great leaders at CNW at the time. One of them was the managing partner, Peter Block. And, I joined as maybe the second or third person on the account. We were brought in to provide them strategic counsel. This was McGuinty government days where they were trying to, land a natural gas power plant in
Oh, the one in Etobicoke. I know, or
Oakville.
Oakville. Okay, because there's the
Oakville.
gas plant in I think it was Oakville, Mississauga, the border there. But
Yeah.
go on. Yeah, no, that's that's one of the things they were pushing for. That was
Yes.
controversial.
It was extremely controversial, contentious. And so this was true consulting. It was an extremely dynamic situation. And again, I worked from TC's offices every afternoon. So I was in at Cohn Wolfe in the morning, and I would race down to TransCanada, and I'd work out of their office alongside the communications folks, the engineers, the environmental consultants, the GR team, and government relations consultants in the afternoon. And it was such a dynamic situation. Like if for anyone listening who is not aware, this power plant had to pass so many different public consultation, environmental consultation checkpoints. And there was some really, let's just say, motivated citizens of Oakville who were extremely well-funded and well-connected. And this was about balancing what needed to be done to make sure that the project went ahead at the same time as keeping tabs on the resistance movement, NIMBYism, if you will, that was rising around this. And I'm talking like like it was pretty intense. There was a black tie gala at one point. Aaron Brockovich was flown in. Like, this was,
Wow.
it was very, it was very dynamic. It was one of the, honestly, it was fun. Like, I'm kind of a sucker for punishment and stuff like that. It was a really interesting, fascinating, rife with challenge and, you know, uh, like it was just a really juicy project to work on.
Would you say that that client really helped sharpen and hone your skills? Because when you're speaking about something like gas pipelines, especially nowadays, I know that there's a lot of environmental consultations that are undertaken to make sure everything is as safe and as environmentally friendly as possible. But I find that information that you obviously in your capacity would want to get out to the media and the public doesn't make its way there.
So this is really interesting because this also hit at a time where like it was like, the burgeoning social media uh, um, you know environment was starting to impact, right? You'd have like the mayor of Oakville uh, tweeting. This is like a
Oh
year
boy.
or two after Twitter became a popular communication tool for something like this, right? And so one of the things that I did was, this group was mobilized on, of course, every social platform, of which there were only a couple at the time. But
Oh no,
I
this is one
built,
of those stories where you're like, you come for the post, but you stay for the comments, right?
yeah, exactly. And I built a social media dashboard, at the time. Like this was not something that was commonly done at this time, but had to build a sentiment and volume kind of tracking dashboard to see what the conversation was like, and it was happening. Everything was happening so quickly that I think that was also powerful insight that I was able to surface, being maybe a little more of a digital native than some of the engineers that I was working with. It just wasn't their world day to day. So it was, oh yeah, I mean, it was fascinating. It was changing hourly. And it was extremely, extremely contentious. I mean, it was also an opportunity to think about content marketing in a way that was, not being done, right? Because as you said, there's so much information that you want to get out to the public, and without seeming like big bad industry, and to sort of balance the scales. There was a lot of kind of emotional, I don't want to call it like propaganda, but there's a lot of like emotional, plays being made, on all sides at that time. So it was, it was a fascinating project to think strategically about, and about how to cultivate influence in a really messy and space where tensions were mounting. It was definitely a really juicy communications challenge.
You mention politicians getting on social media for the very first time, and chances are they started without any training wheels. There's a really funny story I got to share with you about this. Have you ever heard of
Yeah.
a politician? He's got an unfortunate name. His name is Ed Balls.
Oh,
He's
why is this familiar to me?
he's a British politician for the Labour Party, and
Yep.
I'm pretty sure he was in cabinet under Gordon Brown and possibly even Tony Blair as well
Yep.
in the mid 2000s. And apparently, when he got on Twitter, I don't know if it was his first tweet or whatever, but he confused the tweet function with the search function, and he wanted to search for he was basically out there to search for tweets on him. And he went to the tweet function and typed Ed Balls and hit tweet and then went away for a bit. And so it's not a big deal anymore, but the internet
Yeah.
captured that day as Ed Balls Day and it's kind of like a symbol for politicians who clearly do not have PR people or communications people managing their social media
Yep.
and have no desire to learn
Oh
how to
yeah.
use
And
social media.
oh my God. And we still see it today. Like, I mean, what was the case of one of the, was it a governor or something, and down like in one of the Carolinas was liking the Instagram posts of, a whole bunch of folks in the LGBTQ community and trans women, and at the same time coming in his official capacity, sort of condemning the community at the same time. Like, just, I mean, you see these kinds of gaffes all the time where, yeah, God, it gives me kind of, it's giving me flashback nightmares. I'm
Oh
starting to
God.
sweat.
It's
Yeah.
all good. Sequentia Environics.
Yeah.
What attracted you to the company? Did you find the role as the client services and development manager, or did the role find you?
I learned about this organization through a former colleague at C&W, at Cohn Wolfe, who went there and was loving it. And so when an opportunity came up, as Sequentia was growing, I threw my hat in the ring and yeah, and ended up moving over there. It was partly owned by the Environics group, and it was a really interesting. Um, it was definitely a startup. It was a startup environment. It was I think kind of similar to what we now see pretty often. We see agencies and banks doing it, like creating these kind of innovation hubs or these little startup labs. This was a business owner though, Jennifer Evans. She started Sequentia, and it had taken a bunch of different kind of twists and turns. When I was there, I worked in client service and, wore many, many, many hats, but worked with some really incredibly talented people, many of whom, I still keep in touch with today. We had a really good thing going. But the Sequentia was all about community building. It had a proprietary methodology, and it was also a lot about technology, content tracking, and content marketing. And I think it really set a foundation for me, of working in a different kind of environment, in a very digitally driven environment. And it was a really interesting place to work. It was fast. It was sometimes it was messy, but other times it was absolutely brilliant, and have a lot of respect for the folks that I worked with there.
I've always summed up startups this way because I've had people reach out to me because I have some startup experience, not as a founder, but just as an employee. And I've said to them,
Yeah.
I go, if you want to be able to undertake responsibilities that are above your pay grade, that are above what you're currently doing right now, go the startup route. But at the same
Yep.
time, as you have to reach up, you also have to reach down because there isn't that support group to do some of the more mundane jobs that
Oh
support what
yeah.
you do. So you have to do that. Like I always say to sales reps, for example, you get a chance to lead. You get a chance to
Yes.
be much more hands-on with the sales collateral when you're at a startup. But at the same time, if you're booking a lunch and learn with an agency, you got to whip out your credit card. You still can expense it, obviously, but you're the one that's going to have to coordinate the food getting to
Yeah.
the agency. You don't have some sort of media assistant doing that for you. And that turns some people on and that turns some people off
Yeah.
completely from that environment. So it sounds like you were more of the former rather than the latter. You enjoyed your time there.
Yeah, yeah, I did. And to be honest, I'm so glad that I came to a more traditional, or maybe more equipped environment much, much later in my career. Like I'm so glad, because I didn't know any different. I was like, yeah, of course I'll order that lunch, but at the same time, I'm also going to provide and do up the senior communication strategy, or I'm going to prep that the chair of the board of directors for a meeting with a sponsor. But yeah, I'm also going to go and down to the event and tape the cables on the floor down at the convention center. Like, you know, uh, I didn't know any different. I did everything. I I project managed and client managed at the same time. It made me so much more effective and fast and decisive, but it also made me so much more sensitive to all of the different talents and specialties that people have when they do those jobs, and they do them so well, and that is their art and that is their science. So I think it made me really versatile and humble, but also full full respect when I finally kind of went into an environment where all of these disciplines got to live their full lives and got to kind of come together in harmony and make great things together. So there's always two ways to look at it, but I've always been so glad that I really had to wear all the hats. And I think it just makes you so relentless and so effective.
You also spent some time at Twist Image,
Yeah.
a very popular Canadian media and communications and creative company that was acquired a couple of years back. So what did your role as digital account director entail there?
I was the second person hired in to help run the newly acquired Walmart Canada business. So I had a brilliant vice president at Sequentia who was the first hire. And she kind of looked around when she got there and knew that we worked really, really well together. I was on the hunt for a new opportunity after 3 years, three and a half at Sequentia. And so ended up coming over to work with her, and ultimately then was promoted into the account director role to oversee the Walmart Canada business. So it was really juicy for me to come and focus, as I had on Nissan, as I had on TransCanada, to come and refocus after working on so many different clients simultaneously at Sequentia. It was really juicy to come and like live and breathe one big, fast, aggressive client like Walmart. So they were in build mode, and I love build mode. I'm a builder. And they were in build mode. I think Twist Image, I think that's also where I got to learn, sort of they were a digital agency, but also had, as you said, creative strategy. Like it was a real agency. And I think that was almost my first agency on that side of the coin, not a public relations agency or a startup. And it was a great place. It was, there was so much magic there in the way that the team and people connected. But yeah, I came in to work on Walmart, and they're Walmart, right? So, Twist acquires them, and within the first 4 months, they want to do 18 months worth of work, and they're not kidding. Like, do it yesterday. So it was so fast moving. And also, like, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. I don't think Twist had at that time a retail client. Certainly there is no retail client like Walmart. So it was also a little bit about the agency really learning what Walmart meant by fast, which you can imagine what that was.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, you summed it up the best. 18 months worth of work in 4 and start yesterday. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
But during your tenure there, Twist Image, we already teased it, was acquired and became part of the Mirum family. How did your role change? Like, how did the company change once that acquisition occurred?
Yeah, so I think all told, I was at Twist 3 years, and the acquisition came, right. It started to unfold right before my 3-year mark. So my role didn't change. I was very focused on, as I had been the entire time, leading and evolving and sometimes stabilizing the Walmart business. It was all consuming. My role didn't change, but I think I was there. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 months following the acquisition and following, the announcement when things really did start to roll out, that WPP had acquired Twist, and that, there was this new global company, a new global brand called Mirum. And so it was a lot of learning. There was a lot of change. There was change management going on, which was really interesting to see unfold. There were doors opening. There were new client opportunities. There were, regions that were forming and changing. And yeah, so it was definitely on the beginning of that evolution journey in my last handful of months there.
And I think you are one of 3 Twist Image alumni to participate. Huh. Yeah, no, we had Mitch Joel on. He was in the first 10 episodes. Yep. And then Sarah Thompson was on,
right.
10 episodes ago, fall of 2022, yep. I believe. And then we got yourself.
Yeah.
So Twist Image and Mirum people keep finding their way on the Media People podcast.
They do. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm okay. I'm okay to be considered amongst that company. Ton of respect for Mitch, and ton of respect for Sarah as well. Um, yeah, it was. There were so many, and I think Sarah touched on it when you were speaking with her. There were so many wonderful, like-minded, talented, fierce, ambitious people that were part of that organization, and it was like really exciting to work with them on challenging new things. I was like, I've been forever glad that I went to that organization, and have still keep in touch with people to this day. There was definitely a bond that was made there.
You moved on to Real Interactive, and it seemed like you had a dual role there. You were a digital account director, and then you were also a group account director.
Yeah, yeah. Went to work with and for Robin Whalen, who, you talk about like absolute, titans in the industry. She is one of them. I knew Robin only by reputation, and I was looking for something new. I was looking for an agency environment that would allow me to kind of contextualize digital within a bigger picture. So something that was maybe a little bit more integrated. And yeah, and I knew Robin through several people, but by reputation only. And we met for breakfast and we had a wonderful conversation. And I respected her going into that conversation, but I liked her so much coming out of that conversation. So, at that point in my career, I had already worked for some great leaders, but I was really starting to pick my environments and pick my leaders, and make a move only when I was sure about both. So yeah, I went in as director, became GAD, and sat on the leadership team. Had an opportunity to kind of tackle not just some really great client wins and growth, and really cultivate and develop businesses, and new client wins, but also start to tackle some kind of structural stuff. I like to think of myself as equally strategic and uh, operational, and I think there were some, in a big busy agency that had some traditional shopper marketing routes, also had an entire division that was all about experiential. As we were starting to bring together digital and experiential, there was a lot to be done, and I was really curious and interested in like the integration of all of those things from like a productization standpoint, from a positioning standpoint. So it was kind of juicy to tackle some of that stuff.
So you found it attractive then to kind of get out of the trenches and do more of the technical things, because I find that as people climb the ladder and they're less of a, just to use a sports analogy, they're less of a player and more of a coach, especially on the sales side of the business, which I'm on, where people like leading sales, but they want to be in there for the pitches. They want to be part of the hunt. They want to be part of the close. But when you get to sales manager and sales director, you have to be high-fiving and supporting your people who are going to be doing that and putting their names on the contract and not yours. So as you started to climb the ladder and your responsibilities started to change and become, like you said, a lot more structural, that wasn't an issue for you? You were attracted to those duties?
Yeah, because I think to a certain extent, I mean, I think you can always have moments where you can get in your own and other people's way if you don't know when to just step aside. But I think what I have always found really interesting is when I can see that there's an opportunity to bring together the kind of the big picture. Why are we doing this? What are we, what are we trying to do? Like all of those sort of strategic mission based things, and hooking them on to organizational change and change management initiatives and culture stuff. Like you cannot accomplish the first without changing or impacting or adjusting the second. Because if you have otherwise you're just repeating your same goals over and over, and no one is ever going to say that that's what they're out to do. So you've always got a more ambitious goal. You've always got a new business target, which exceeds what you achieved last quarter or last year. So if you're actually going to be able to do those things, then you have to look at the organization's functions and operations and adjust. Like I am my wife is a creature of habit, and I am the opposite. I'm not in any way, I don't avoid change. I relish it. I love it. If you're into astrology, you would say I'm a true Sagittarius. But I love change. I love toying with things. I like breaking things and rebuilding them. And so I think I've always looked for opportunities where, I can work on that big picture mission, but I can also make those recommendations, understand the mechanics of like what has to change so that they actually get done. Otherwise, they're words on a page.
Okay, so bringing everything full circle, what brought you to Wunderman Thompson?
I like to say I came in through the Wunderman door. So I first went to Wunderman. At Real, I had built the GlaxoSmithKline, as it was then called. It's now new organization, Haleon, for consumer health, but it was GSK Consumer Health. Was one of Real's clients, and I had built it from. It wasn't, a digital client within the organization. It worked with other sectors, other divisions within 6 Degrees Real Interactive, but I made it a digital client and grew it over 2 years from. I think it was, I don't know, I think there was one project to $2-3 million client, and developed a really good relationship with the head of marketing, a woman by the name of Babita Batal. And Wunderman, was going through the process of bringing GSK Consumer Healthcare in globally. They had just won the global digital AOR, and Babita was very interested in having me come over and join the Wunderman team, and to build the work with her, to work with her team of marketers to build digital capability, but also build the infrastructure and build the team and build the ways of working for Wunderman. So as soon as I met the then president of Wunderman, Michael Sergio, I was like, okay, so yes, I'm going to go, and I'm going to have this amazing leader in Michael, and I'm going to have this wonderful supportive client who I have history with in Babita. And it was, a really great couple of years. So I kind of came in through the Wunderman door, and about 2 to 3 years after working on that business, building that team, it was, this integration, this global merger was announced between Mirum, Wunderman Thompson, Wunderman and J. Walter Thompson. So it was almost in my 6 to 7 years with them. I had, again, one of those part 1, part 2 moments where my last 3 years was under the Wunderman Thompson banner, and so went through that whole, global merger and really kind of felt and saw and was part of how it played out locally.
You mentioned early on in our chat that you had left the company, but they talked you to coming back in 3 days later to work on a very specific project. But then once that project was completed, you departed to take some time for yourself. So what motivated you to take that time for yourself? What was going on? Because just in speaking with you, is it safe to say that you probably had similar feelings or emotions as you did at the tail end of your second year of university when you said, you know what, I'm just going to hit a hard pause on the things that are keeping me busy in life?
Yeah, definitely safe to say that. But I think having gone through the merger, and we all, like anyone who was at Wunderman Thompson during that time, we were really fortunate. We had a very transparent, open, easy to talk to leader. Jeff Dack came in, and that's a pretty wild task to be handed that remit, to bring all those cultures and companies together. I'm so proud of the work that I did when I was there, and I had wonderful partnerships in my strategy and creative and tech partners, Kevin Flynn and Cass Zawodowski and Tim Boett and just like wonderful, supportive, kind of step family, right? Because it was like this big integrated family that had to come together. So it was such a like interesting process to go through the merger, really juicy, big client assignments. I ended up sort of almost inheriting as a vice president all of legacy Wunderman and a couple of Thompson clients that kind of came my way in this sort of reorg. And so a hefty role, and at the same time also took on the leadership of the Microsoft business, which was a really unique kind of embedded model, where Wunderman Thompson was responsible for helping Microsoft staff and support their organization through data analytics folks and integrated marketers and social strategists. So I had another, aside from my business unit of 40 or 50 people, I had another 27 people within that group as well. So I know I took on a lot. I love taking on a lot, and I love like opportunities to build. But as I started to kind of hit that place where you think of what do I want to do next? What do I want that to feel like? What do I want it to give me? What do I want to be able to take away from it? And I started really asking myself a lot of questions, and I was being recruited and interviewing for some great positions, and actually took myself out of the running for a couple of SVP roles, purely based on I'm not entirely sure that's what I want next. And I started working with an executive coach and spent, I would say, 6-8 months really contending with what it was that I wanted to do. And I didn't want to make a next move just to make a next move. And I actually had some really interesting, like lovely, candid, open conversations with Jeff about this too. And he was a supportive leader in that respect, and really kind of, I think every professional gets to a point where you've got to ask yourself some hard questions. So all in all, it led me to the decision to resign from the VP role at WT, and to take a bit of a breather, and to just sort of give myself some space to ask some questions, and take a course and do some learning, and just sort of explore what was out there. I booked myself, like classic, like I booked myself some informational interviews. I kind of embraced that idea of almost like being a young professional again. And I think sometimes we forget to do that as we move on in our careers. So I just started talking to people. I was talking to people in change management. I was talking to people in, other agency leadership roles. I was talking to people in strategy roles. It was just like kind of a nice time to just get the juices flowing again. And I'm really, it took me as someone who likes to go to the next thing, and, it took me a lot of convincing myself that it was okay to take that like pause. So, and to be asked back was a huge compliment, and it was sort of, it worked for everyone around the table at that time. So fast forward 11 months and just sort of wrapping up this contract with WT. So it was great to stay in that capacity. And so now I'm at the point where I'm excited to explore, new opportunities. But yeah, it was definitely the right move to just give myself a little bit of that space.
And part of those new opportunities have been independent consulting.
Yes.
Take us through what that's like. Everything from how do you land that consulting gig? What are the typical problems they're bringing you in to solve? And how do you, as kind of a one-woman show, kind of like a freelancer, if you almost want to call it that, how do you come into those organizations and say, okay, I'm going to fix these problems without any sort of resistance from the people on the inside already?
So, I mean, you've asked a few great questions. And again, like I'm at the beginning of this journey, but I think, what is important to me is right now to look at opportunities that are becoming of where I want to go and where I want to be and what I do best. Um, I'm not looking to like, necessarily to like jump in and kind of, jump to an account role and start running around. And I I think it's, you're always gonna, you're always gonna do that, and you're always gonna manage clients, and you're always gonna have, working amongst teams. And don't get me wrong, like I love that too, but I think, you have to be really clear about what it is you do best. You have to be really clear, what your offering is, what you uniquely can bring to the table. And then I think for me, I've always been someone, earlier I was talking about that kind of through line of like being embedded, right? Being embedded in these spaces, whether it was at Nissan or TC, or really embedding myself with the Walmart business or the GSK business. I've always really thrived on context. And so I know that I can't come into any situation and start providing recommendations or a point of view without first building some context. So it takes a willing partner on the other side. Anyone who's going to hire me to come in has got to, believe that, believe in that process of building that context. Otherwise, what are we there doing? And I think I'm so, um, I'm really grateful for my network, because having conversations, as I said, I'm at the beginning of this journey, and having conversations um, with people in the industry, looking at all different types of um, targets, if you will, like whether it's big network agencies or smaller businesses. I think having conversations with people who can really articulate like, okay, what are you up against? What are you suffering from? What do you need? What do you imagine you need? What do you think you need? And let's just have a conversation about how I might be able to, kind of adapt or morph into that solution. And I think I have a very wide background. I think in one of Mitch Joel's books, I think it was Control Alt Delete, he talks about like the zigzag, and I'm a zigzagger. I've zigzagged through a bunch of different industries, and I think that's something now that is making those conversations more fruitful, because hopefully, anyone who's going to hire me is going to be able to see that I can kind of support in a variety of different ways, through marketing, communications, public, private sector.
And what does the interview process look like, or just the job search process look like for someone going for a managing director or an SVP role? Because there are very few of those roles in an organization. And at the same time, you don't see a lot of postings for them.
It almost tends to be, and it tells you a lot about the organization, but in my experience, it tends to be one of two extremes. You can have the heavy administrative, multi-step, 9 interview, the panel, or we want you to meet with our head of ops, our head of strategy, our head of creative, our head of, like you can have that after you've already spent a couple of hours talking to what would be like the either North American or Canadian agency lead. You can have that multi-step, and I think I've seen in my experience, I think that's been common, because I think there's so many more like checks and balances, and I think in a way, most of those conversations though have not been about ticking boxes. They've been about like actually having a conversation. Like it's not, come in and tell us 26 things. It's like most of those people are just there to they know that you've met the requirements by that point, so they want to know, can they work with you? So I've actually found those conversations to be really pleasant. Conversely, you can have someone come in and say to you, and I've had this too, and I've had this even for a consulting opportunity that I'm speaking with someone about, where I've been recommended by a couple of people. So like I came in to talk to one of the big agencies here, and he said to me, don't tell me what don't give me your resume. I've already, I know about you through this person and this person, and I know you're not nuts, and I like, I like kind of like, don't tell me your resume. I know I've checked into you. I've done my homework. Like he said to me, I wouldn't be talking to you if I didn't already think you were great, because I've heard, so it like lets you start the conversation in a different place. And that's refreshing too. So yeah, I think to me, I've seen like both extremes.
Becca, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you so much for your time. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Yeah, lay them on me.
Okay, I asked this question to Mitch Joel, even though I didn't do rapid fire questions in the beginning, and his response was, "Oh, you're going to make me pick my favorite child." And I don't think if it was going back a while, and I don't think he actually picked anything, and we skipped over it. But for you, the campaign you were most proud of.
Okay, so this is where, so I depart a little from my esteemed colleagues in the advertising and communications space. I think I don't have one campaign that I think of as like the moment, or something that makes me weepy. I have extreme like loyalty to and respect for the talented, strategy, creative technology, leaders in my industry and in my most recent positions that I've worked with. I think I've been so fortunate to work with some really incredibly talented people, but I don't know. I don't know what it is about me. I don't think in campaigns. I think about like moments. Like there are things that I wish a client bought. Um, Something that was on the cutting room floor that I see as a moment that I feel like, we're never going to get that moment back. I think about moments of collaboration or partnership, or when something went totally beautifully when we thought maybe it wouldn't. Like those are the things that I kind of return to, and I think about in my personal resume in this business. I guess I just kind of think less about campaigns. I don't know if that makes me a bad kid in advertising, but that's just not how I think.
Okay, very diplomatic. You can tell that you defended oil pipelines at one point in your career. Okay. And
Is
I
it
will
showing?
say, I've had so I've had three Twist Image people on this podcast, and
Yeah.
two out of the three refused to answer that question or sidestepped it altogether. So Sarah Thompson is the only one the only alumnus from Twist Image that answered that question. So moving on to the next
Okay.
one, your favorite movie,
Okay, well, I have a bit of a soft spot for old, like black and white movies. It's like used to watch
like Turner
Saturday night at
Classic
the
Movies,
movies. Oh yeah, like I was the kid who, and this is again with the grandparents I talked about earlier, used to watch like Saturday night at the movies with Howie Yost, and I'm kind of a sucker for, yeah, like your sort of screwball comedies and stuff like that. I would say the Philadelphia Story, which is like just, I mean, it's just such a like energetic and hilarious, fun movie. If you haven't seen it, Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, and Katharine Hepburn. Like it's just, but you almost don't even feel like you're watching a movie. You're just watching these three epic stars move around the screen, and you can't take your eyes off of them. And they're all so amazing. I would say that, or maybe Goodfellas.
my wife and I were talking about classic films. She's got a film degree, and we're both big film buffs, and we were talking about that era of cinema. And it's funny,
Oh, so good.
something that we something that won't be replicated ever again is the fact that they built their sets. Like they didn't
Yeah,
go out onto the street level, and I mean maybe if they had to film in the desert, sure, something like that. But
yeah,
you didn't go to a grocery store to film. You built a grocery store set. You built a facade. You built the inside on a sound
yep.
studio or sound stage somewhere else. And like even we were watching, I was okay, not we. I was watching the old Batman 66 TV show, and I'm just like, man,
Uh-huh.
everything was built. Everything. You're
Yeah,
never going to see that again. It's either on location or green screen.
yeah.
And
The
I think that's a
talent
lost
too.
art.
Yeah, the talent. When you think about like all of the people whose life, their life's work were building and painting and like it, yeah, it just it yeah, it's amazing.
Well, Do you remember that anti-privacy PSA AMC used to run before every film? Like
Yes.
you'd have a voiceover just to give it to the audience, to people listening, is that you would have this voiceover and you'd have this like gentleman talking about all the films he worked on, and you're just like, Jesus, is this Robert De Niro? Like he's talking about, and
Yeah.
then he starts to go into the fact that he's a set designer, and then he starts to talk about how because of piracy, it's eating into his business, and sometimes it's very hard to string together 12 months worth of work. And now
Yeah.
it's a green screen. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what's eating
Exactly.
into it that much. Maybe they'll design the floor so they don't have to green screen that, but everything else.
Yeah. It's unreal. If I think back, like I mean, I watch It's a Wonderful Life every Christmas, and just think about like, the bank, or the streetscapes, or the beautiful old house that that they fix up. It's like, it's just, you can't replicate that. There's just like a texture, and yeah, it's something special.
And if you
Those
want to
movies.
nail that era, like you've got to get all the little details. So a lot of research has to be done. You can't wing it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I think there's just like a lack of distraction. Like there's just something really pure about it too. Like, I had an amazing film professor at Western, Larry Garber, who really introduced me to a lot of like old screwball comedies, like It Happened One Night with Claude Colbert, or like, His Girl Friday, and like, it just, there's something just so like pure and clear and just like perfect about those films.
See, we didn't study comedy in the film class I took at Brock University, but we did do a bit of a section in my first year on Hitchcock films. And
Yes.
I gotta tell you, you know what makes those films so intense? It's the writing. It's just
Hmm.
like I think it was Strangers on a Train and Double Indemnity we had to watch. And I always forget, I think it's Double Indemnity where there's the insurance salesman where he's
Yeah.
like, it's in my
Yep.
gut
Fred
says this.
McMurray and
Yeah,
Barbara.
and he
Who
would
is
just
it?
like get into the scene and I'm just like, the guy's just talking about his gut saying you're the villain. And it just turns the entire scene upside down. Like you could just see everyone sweating buckets. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
what? Like it seems so silly, but at the same time it pulls me in going, oh my God, he
Oh
totally
yeah.
knows.
Oh yeah. And stuff that um I feel like it's either plot points that would like scream past modern day audiences, or something that would have one of those like, explanation lines where it's like, for those of you who don't get it, there's the like, it, entire films rotated on one, like, really either mysterious or alluring plot point. Like the entire film would rotate on that single point. Yeah, it's just that sort of purity of focus. Um, yeah, and you think back to like Maltese Falcon or The Big Sleep, or like, it just, oh, they're just, yeah, the tension that you build, um, it with just like the simplicity and the clarity in those films. It's so great.
Well, when you said that, that like it just revolves around one plot point, Citizen Kane popped into my head because it's all about
Yeah,
Rosebud. Like
yeah,
who is or what is Rosebud?
yeah. That's a perfect example. Yeah.
Okay, so not to belabor this point even further, but did you guys study Citizen Kane in film by any chance?
No, no. I kind of came across it and came to it outside of film, but
Because we picked it
um,
apart for an entire lecture, and one thing that I found very interesting about that film, going back to set design, is that Orson Welles didn't have much of a budget, and so what they would
yeah,
do is when they would build a room, they would build it with two walls, and they'd film it from one angle so you thought you were on maybe the right side of the room, and then they'd film it from another angle and maybe change the decor a little bit, so move the
yeah,
decor painting around, so it's like, oh, now we're on the left side of the room. So he
yeah,
was a real pioneer in these tricks to save money
yeah.
without compromising production values.
Also, what are you going to let like stand, in your way? Like you're not going to let budget stand in your way when you're like, when you have when you've got a film like that you just you just want to bring to life. It's like, it's your everything. So I mean, the ingenuity, it's like the, you know what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who
Hmm.
would you want to play you?
I would say, I'm gonna go Laura Dern for that one. I think she is. I think she's. I think she's brilliant. I think she's sometimes underrated. I think she's not overexposed, which is wonderful. but I just think she just mixes like kind of she mixes sensitivity and intensity really well, and I like that about her.
She's got incredible range. What was the show that she was on? It was the HBO show with Reese Witherspoon was in it, Zoe
Oh, Big Little
Kravitz.
Lies,
Big Little Lies, that's it. Like
where she plays Renata. Oh yeah.
she's absolutely nuts in it. Like
Oh,
incredibly entitled when their fortune
yep.
starts to fall apart. But then at the same time you forget that she was the capable scientist in Jurassic Park.
I
At the
know,
same
right?
time you're just like, "Oh, okay."
I know. She is a little bit of a she's a chameleon, right? Like she disappears inside roles in such a beautiful way, and you almost like you sort of forget that it's her, and I love actors that can do that. She was in a wonderful series that only lasted a couple of years, called Enlightened, and I don't know whether you've ever seen it, but she plays like a woman who is like, just sort of hell bent on corporate America, and she's very like um, extremely driven, and she ends up uh, her entire professional life like kind of implodes, and it's all about her trying to get her life back together and this sort of like awakening that she has. It's an HBO Mike White project. Anyway, I only knew about it because my wife was just obsessed with it and just thought it was like some of the most brilliant acting that she's ever seen. So yeah, if you like her, check that out.
As a side note, if you're looking for something to watch, have you checked out The
Yeah.
Diplomat yet on Netflix? Kerry Russell just dropped last
No,
weekend. Yeah.
my sister-in-law was just telling me that she started it and she was really liking it so far.
Yeah, get to episode three. Sometimes episode one and two of those shows can be a little slow, but once it gets
Yeah.
to three, this show takes off and you can't stop watching it.
Okay. I will check that out.
All right, follow up. If Hollywood were to make that movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
Oh, I'm gonna borrow a line from what I think is maybe my favorite series, The West Wing. Little Aaron Sorkin line. They end like every big kind of moment where they've sort of you know come through the fire, and the team and the staff comes together and says, okay, what's next? I think I would call it What's Next.
I think it was their final season. It was the debate episode that they did live.
Yep.
Uh, I forget who it was. Oh God, the two actors. It's funny because I know them by their character names, but Alan Alda and oh, he was in Star Wars. Tip of my tongue, and he was the Democratic candidate. I want to give Aaron.
Jimmy Smith.
That's it. Aaron Sorkin doesn't get enough credit for that episode and just that whole storyline because he does a
Yeah.
really good job of humanizing both sides of the aisle. Whereas
Oh
if you
my
look, if
God,
you turn
yeah.
to the media doesn't try to like, if you're liberal media, you don't try to understand why conservatives think the way they do. And if you're conservative media, you
Yeah.
try not to think that. And I remember that debate episode did a wonderful job of doing that. And the fact that it was done live to mimic a real
Yeah.
debate, I really think that like, that was a great series. I'm with you on that. But that episode right on its own is a bit of a gem that
Yep.
deserves to stand out and get credit and special credit, and it doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like an episode that kind of lives, or it brings to life what that whole show tries to do and tries to stand for and tries to capture. Um, yeah, there's a lot of magic in that show, and with so many of those actors. But I agree with you. That's a pretty special accomplishment.
Your favorite book?
Uh, White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I just I read it years ago, and the characters were so real to me. I found myself looking for them on the subway platform. Like it was a book I couldn't get out of my head. And I could not believe that that was her debut novel. I think she was like 18, 19, maybe 20 when she wrote it. Like it's staggering.
Your favorite song?
You're My Best Friend by Queen. Um, yeah, my wife and I, after we got married, that was the song that we walked back down the aisle to. And yeah, I love it.
The best advice you have ever received?
I've been fortunate to be given a lot of good advice by people that I really trust. But I think I was given one piece of advice by a mentor and former boss of mine, and you know, she just said, just remember, it's okay to say that doesn't work for me. And I think as someone who, maybe is guilty sometimes of taking on too much and always thinking I have to do the next thing, it was really powerful to just sort of be reminded of that fact, to say, just to make sure that you continue to keep factoring yourself into the equation.
My signature closing question: if you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why?
I think I would probably be doing something that maybe connects back to, what we were talking about earlier. I don't know necessarily that it would be public service. I think it would be something that like kind of blends public and private enterprise together. I think I'm really interested in like social innovation and social entrepreneurship. I really like that sort of intersection of how, interesting new, fresh business models can address like social problems or can, be harnessed for social change. There's an organization called the Center for Social Innovation in Toronto. Was founded by a woman who is a leader in the space, Tanya Sermon, and I've always kind of had my eye on that outfit, that organization. So I think if I wasn't where I am, I think I would be working in, social enterprise and social change, social innovation.
Becca, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise. Thank you, Victor. It's been great. Great talking to you.
That's it for today's show. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram @VicGenova.